The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild is a survival horror game where you're trapped in a quiet, desolate, post-apocalyptic wasteland. In an endless loop of time, you're forced to endure harsh winters, scorching deserts, torrential rain, and crippling loneliness, knowing that the most powerful creature in this kingdom is on the loose, and at any point, he could take your life. Whether you're enjoying a meal, robbing a Hylian blind, harassing the wildlife, or asleep, when you least expect it, he will be there, and he will bring about your end. But look on the bright side. This isn't you. Instead, you play as Punished Link, an amnesiac, mentally deranged serial killer, glutton, and actual fucking terrorist, who, for the millionth time, is on a quest to save the Kingdom of Hyrule from Ganon. Calamity Ganon. But in this Zelda title, there's a twist. It's open world, like every fucking video game past 2010. Except this one is actually good. In an ongoing era of bland, cookie-cutter open world games, Breath of the Wild will stand above the rest and fix approximately one of the genre's most glaring flaws, while simultaneously falling into a couple dozen pitfalls of its own. But that shit doesn't make it any less entertaining. In a genre whose very name is contradictory to its nature, Breath of the Wild dares to let the player freely explore its world that is open, and approach combat from any angle they see fit. So wake the fuck up and grab your iPads, kids, because it's time to step out into the blinding sunlight of the disgusting outdoors and explore The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. When objectively reviewing Breath of the Wild's very complex gameplay loop, it's paramount to begin with the most profound, intellectually stimulating, media-intensive, augmentatious, self-reflexive, near-absurdist tutorial segments of game ever presented in the history of video gameplay forever after. Upon being unleashed to wreak havoc on Hyrule, you will be instructed to complete 4 shrines on the isolated plateau, and that's it. No step-by-step handholding, slow-paced walking, or nocturnal creatures asking if you understood all the text you just skipped. The Great Plateau lets the player explore and discover things at their own pace. With the ability to climb almost anything, you can go anywhere you want. As for how you deal with obstacles on the way or at your destination, that's up to you. And that extends to the main game. Free the 4 divine beasts, defeat Ganon, in whatever order you please, and after how many hours suits your fancy. You can even skip the first step and run it down to Hyrule Castle in your underpants with 3 hearts. I wouldn't recommend it though unless you're speedrunning. Between this, you will simply walk around and explore. There's no other way of describing it, but Breath of the Wild is tranquil, serene, and naturally encourages exploration through ingenious map design. No matter where you are, something will catch your eye, tempting you to discover what it is. Hyrule's design works not just in its scale and beauty, but its ability to naturally guide the player without explicitly telling them what to do at every turn. Both the map and in the actual world, you will look at something and think, that looks interesting, I wonder what's over there. And for every single one, you can go there, provided it's not raining and you have enough stamina. You'll forage for food, critters, and plants, discover multiple uses for items, learn to deal with weather and temperature, climb on the highest peak you can find, determine your next move, and feel a sense of wonder. That is until you find a black lizard with a katana. This is where the fun begins. With the physics-based engine and weapons made of glass, Breath of the Wild lets you get wild in how you choose to eradicate the inferior races of Hyrule. Roll a boulder down a cliff, channel the element, go full Solid Snake, blow them up with conveniently placed explosives, or even electrocute them in the water. This is also an effective way to fish. The AI comes just how I like them, broken and inconsistent. It's retarded enough to let you get away with the dumbest shit, sometimes forgetting you exist moments after you blow it off a cliff. Other times it's alerted to your presence for no actual fucking reason, or couldn't be bothered to attack until you get close enough. And they're so bad with bows, you can use their stormtrooper aim to farm arrows. In this wild, wild west of Hyrule, there are no laws or centralized government, letting you plunder and pillage as you please as long as your victims aren't any of the 5 master races. Basically, the entirety of this game has been crafted for the enjoyment of Link at the expense of everyone else. But none of the aforementioned methods of purging are effective in combat. In fact, while they might be creative and entertaining, they're largely inefficient if you wish to survive the wilds. I suppose I'm doing this a bit backwards, but let's get back to basics. Firstly, remember that Hyrule is still a communist country. Instead of their weapons, they become our weapons. With no actual combos to learn, pick up whatever you find or steal and start hacking away. Watch it break, then switch to another. Or if you're the kind of person who enjoys dexterity builds and fighting with little risk because you're too much of a beta male and refuse to confront your problems, you can use the bow and arrow, which is only even the slightest bit respectable because the arrows curve more than Zelda's ass. While basic, these two fighting styles are both quite effective in negotiating peace. But if you want to bring Zelda's aborted fetus of a final boss to justice, you'll need just a tad bit more. So it's time to get into advanced techniques. The first is the spin to win. While every weapon allows you to charge up an attack by consuming your stamina gauge, only two-handed ones yield enough DPS to make your investment worth it. If you're the kind of person who doesn't like to play games, just equip a two-handed weapon and hold down the Y button. The game will play itself as you stun-lock every enemy in a small kilometer radius. Next up, we have Flurry Rush, or what I like to call Revengeance mode. While the game tells you it'll activate from a last-second dodge, very original idea, Nintendo, this thing has got a fucking mind of its own. Sometimes it won't trigger, sometimes it will, even though Link actively puts himself in danger, and other times he wouldn't have gotten hit to begin with. Despite its inconsistency, it's satisfying to pull off, has no counter, makes your screen look like this, and is still more useful than shield bashing, except in one case, and that's against the Guardians. Early in your adventure, these things will be your greatest fear and your main deterrent from entering Hyrule Castle or exploring certain areas. If they lock onto you, run. If running does not work, pray. This changes after around 80 hours of solving puzzles made for toddlers and finding golden turds. Then you can confidently hack off their legs and watch them crawl away in fear. Or just learn to parry their lasers. It's the most effective way of killing them, besides giving them a lobotomy. And I should warn you, if you have an attachment disorder because your dad went out to get milk when you were 6 years old and never came back, stay the fuck away from Breath of the Wild. Because every single weapon you find will break after 1 or 2 combat encounters, severing the attachment you were just making. The Master Sword doesn't break, it just has a battery life worse than an iPhone. Now that you have an extensive understanding of Breath of the Wild's deep combat system, I should take a moment to discuss the vermin littering this cesspool of a kingdom. The oppressed that once rose up against the 5 master races. A century after their violent uprising, it is your job to expunge every last one of them. There are a total of 3 different kinds of enemies in Breath of the Wild, and like us humans, are color-coded to determine their relative strength and social standing. So while the game does lack enemy variety, it fulfills its racial diversity quota. I should clarify, there are more than just 3 enemy types, but most are few and far between. The Hinoxes become absolute jokes with a single arrow and a spin to win, and while the Molduga are creative region-specific bosses, they're not that tough either. Taluses are hilariously incompetent, and the Wizards aren't even worth mentioning. Now the Lynels, that's my shit. Early on, you will face the reality that these things are tough as shit, and you will need excellent timing, a lot of weapons, and either some serious balls or a lot of hearts to take them on. I have nothing bad to say about them. It should be noted that while there are a myriad of ways you can damage the disgusting pigs of this world, you can die from almost anything as well. Aside from the obvious fall damage and getting bitch-smacked for over half your health, you can die from a puzzle you're solving or being sat on by a Hinox. As the great Octavian Musk once said, even freedom has a price, and the price for your freedom in combat is that you're free to die. But there's a very simple way of negating that to the point of trivializing all forms of damage: armor upgrades. When you visit a fairy fountain, an inactive Twitch thought will ask you for a donation so you can witness her 24/7 hot tub stream, with every subsequent payment inflating their prices all the way up to 10,000 fucking rupees. Though expensive, you fork over the cash anyway, you disgusting pay pig, because the upgrades are worth it. A set of the most basic, fully upgraded armor in Breath of the Wild is enough to render you almost invincible. Lastly, if you're ever concerned that your actions might be causing mass extinction, don't. The Blood Moon will ensure that you can continue your never-ending quest of truth and justice, respawning not only ore deposits and materials, but every single overworld mob and boss, causing Hyrule to be consumed in an endless cycle of carnage. Violence does indeed breed violence, but in the end, that's the fucking point, you idiot. As with any open-world game, Breath of the Wild contains dozens of side quests and NPCs that exist for the sole purpose of giving you said side quests, most of whom, I should point out, are unusually horny. It's really hard to explain why, but whether you're Link or a twink, everyone is horny for or around Hyrule's blonde manlet.
I'm over here stroking my dick. I got lotion on my dick right now. I'm just stroking my shit.
You can have sex with one of them or stay at the inn in Goron City to get molested. Though there are some standouts, most notably Cass, an accordion-playing avian who is the only NPC with an IQ high enough to recognize a hero when they see one. Then there's Pura, a literal child who upgrades your Sheikah slate. But because this is a Japanese game that needs to justify the existence of the Rule 34 artwork of its characters, she's not actually a child, she's just an adult that reverse-aged her body. And then there's the Giga Chad Robbie, who married a woman 50 years younger than him. God bless Robbie. However, the game's main attraction is its near-limitless exploration and freedom that work in tandem. In Breath of the Wild, you have options. There's the intended way, and then there's the sure, that works way. In the overworld, in a shrine, or a divine beast, there's typically more than one way of getting somewhere or doing something. To counter cold weather, for instance, you could put on warm clothing, drink an elixir, or have a fire-based weapon at the ready. But here's my favorite example. Let's say, hypothetically, you want to go up Death Mountain to Goron City. You've got a few choices, bucko. You can purchase fireproof elixirs from this opportunistic cunt for an inflated price, or channel your inner primate to catch the ingredients and make your own. These are the incorrect ways to ascend Death Mountain. First, pan-fry dozens of meat and radishes together and warp to the tower. Then, use your dishes to prevent your death after spontaneously combusting, forcing Link on an agonizing trek while his body is engulfed in fire. Once you reach Goron City, make a right to the armor shop and fork over several hundred rupees for an overpriced set of flame-resistant armor. That's how it's done. I'll also take the liberty into spoiling the entire game's content, because there's only two things you can discover: a shrine or a Korok seed, sometimes right next to each other. Congratulations, you know everything there is to know in Breath of the Wild. I'm being facetious, of course, but here's a second example of what I mean. In my ventures across Hyrule, I happened upon a mysterious fountain in the Akala region, which told me to present it Dinral's scale, refusing to elaborate. No objective markers, no go talk to this NPC, nothing. I was free to find this scale as I wished. With my extensive knowledge of Hyrule's lore, I knew Din was the goddess of fire and power. Given the fountain's proximity to Death Mountain, I figured I would explore that region and look for some sort of fire dragon. After exploring and getting sidetracked for a bit on shrines, a pitch-black island that turned out to be another shrine, I fought my first Lionel through the night until the sun came up. Victorious, I turned around and spotted this gigantic CCP-certified dragon heading my way. In a panic, I shot an arrow at it, acquired its scale, and excitedly ran back to the fountain. I was on the edge of my seat to see what was in store for me for completing. It was a shrine. It's almost always a shrine. Those shrines are the way you acquire more stamina vessels and heart containers, enabling you to further explore Hyrule for more shrines and shrines. It is admittedly quite disappointing that your efforts will seldom yield anything more. The most exciting thing you'll find in any treasure chest are rupees, since your weapon inventory will almost always be full. And the most effective way to get rupees otherwise is to subject yourself to the coal mines of Eldin. And with how easy combat becomes, shrines and Korok seeds will lose their value. And holy fuck is the game oversaturated with the latter. Do you have the slightest idea how unexciting and predictable the game becomes when you know that every circular rock formation or conveniently placed boulder on a cliff is just another Korok seed? And my heart goes out to the underpaid Japanese intern that had to come up with all of the shrine names. As for the other side quests, I'll give you a simple guide. If it ain't a shrine quest, it's a fetch quest. Anything that doesn't unlock a shrine usually just tells you to go collect something for someone. Allow me to demonstrate the typical Breath of the Wild side quest. Hey Link, anyone ever tell you that you're really fucking hot? Yeah, everyone does. So my wife left me not too long ago. What? She's 2 houses down. Oh. Why'd she leave you? Because I like cocks too much. You what? My cocks. I like my cocks too much. Oh, 7 are missing. Can you go get them? Sure. That's about as unique as they get. Most denizens of Hyrule exist for the sole purpose of either giving you a shrine quest, a fetch quest, or informing you that there just so happens to be a shop to your right. Littering the map are also stables and horses for you to overpopulate them with. Personally, I never found use for them. You wander off the beaten path so much they become obsolete. Not to mention, Nintendo do what Nintendo does by locking Epona behind a fucking amiibo. And there's a DLC motorcycle. I got nothing else to say about Breath of the Wild's open world. It's big, it's beautiful, it ain't a woman, but its biggest flaw is just how predictable it becomes. Still a step up in terms of most of its competition though. But now it's time to talk about Gorons, Gerudo, Rito, and Zora. Long ago, the four nations lived together in harmony, under the supreme leadership of the Hylians, but everything changed when America attacked. In preparation for the prophesized return, automated soldiers were unearthed to do battle with the spirit of capitalism. But let's just say things didn't pan out very well. 100 years passed and Link reawakens with no memories intact, only his survivor and killer instincts. And it's up to you to reinstate the CCP after it was overthrown by the disgusting American pig of free market capitalism. To do this, you must seek out the power of the Patriots, and with their aid, assault Hyrule Castle to end the American reign of terror on this land and restore power in Hyrule to its rightful owner. Zelda has been suffering for an entire century, holding back Calamity Ganon, clinging on to the vain hope that Link will one day come to save her, pleading for him to hurry. But if you ask me, if she has the energy to nag at me, she can sit there for a couple hundred more hours while I dick around in Hyrule and amass my collection of golden turds. There isn't much else to the story other than this. Most of the cutscenes consist of Zelda talking to herself as Link stands there speechless at her fat fucking ass. If you want the full context, go buy a $60 alternative timeline. As for the rest of the story, let me sum it up. Hey Link, I don't suppose you noticed that gargantuan bird you can spot from halfway across Hyrule while you were on the way here, did you? I might have. Yeah, can you take it down? Why are you asking me to? Because you have an iPad on your hip. What the fuck does that have to do with anything? That means you can afford the hospital bill if you fail. Holy shit, it's a fucking balcony. I'm a main character because I have voice acting. What's up, Link? You gotta activate the 4 terminals. 1 down, 2 down. I can count, you know. Now go activate the main terminal. Watch out, that thing killed me 100 years ago. Good job, Link. Here's something that'll break this already broken game. Thanks for helping us out, Link. Now take a weapon that's worse than the one you already have and will break in 15 minutes. Thanks. Fantastic work. You freed a divine beast. Now repeat that 3 more times and go to Hyrule Castle, spending a few hours robbing the dead and exploring every nook and cranny for powerful weapons to aid in your fight against Ganon. Or just go 1, 2, 3. Look at me, I'm at the final boss, who is nothing short of a fucking joke, alongside the other 4 main bosses. Thunderblight is pretty good though. While I'm here complaining about things I don't like about Breath of the Wild, let's get a few out of the way. The repetition of the shrines and divine beasts, especially in their aesthetics, kind of fucking suck. Secondly, the game is very easily broken. Setting aside the overabundance of combat glitches you can take advantage of and how ridiculous defense becomes, having a near infinite supply of healing items you can consume instantaneously from a pause menu trivializes most encounters. Thirdly, the spawning skeletons at night get fucking annoying. Finally, once you start to find more weapons that do more damage than what you'll find on anything except a Lionel, you're more likely to just skip combat entirely. There are just a few more criticisms, but I don't want to seem like a contrarian who asserts that Breath of the Wild is overrated because it's not perfect. I gotta give the game credit where it's due. It remedied one of the most glaring issues plaguing the open world genre. Exploration is actually engaging, albeit temporarily. It might not be rewarding, but something about those first dozen hours of Breath of the Wild where you're discovering new food, items, and weapons while walking to anything that piques your interest has more wonder and imagination packed into it than the entirety of Ubisoft's game library. I hope that Nintendo can somehow extend this feeling to the majority of Breath of the Wild sequel. To sum up this review, I give The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 28 heart containers out of 30. I'll see you next time. Hello there, my friend. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like, a comment, or subscribing to help my channel grow. And I would like to sincerely thank my Filipino intern Kai for helping me get footage for this review.